Welcome to the Behind Beliefs and Behaviors podcast, where we take you on a journey of what is behind the specific beliefs and behaviors that impact individuals and organizations. With our guests, we get to the root cause of what stands in the way of everything from health, wealth, and relationships to leadership, community transformation, and societal progress. From topics on leadership, psychological safety, corporate culture and communication, to parenting, trauma, relationships, personal health, and intimacy, this podcast is sure to get you to the source and provide you practical tips to transform your life one root cause at a time. I am your host, Dr. Maisha Claiborne. I'm a physician, a coach, a consultant, and an expert in trauma-informed communication. The founder of the Mind Remapping Company, I help individuals and organizations better understand the brain, behavior, and the root of false beliefs so that you can more effectively listen, communicate, connect, and create fulfilling relationships and results in your personal and professional life. Join us every Monday morning at 8 a.m. and let's get to the root cause and discover what's behind your beliefs and behaviors. For now, as usual, the things that I would talk about, and then there are the things that I decide to talk about. I was talking with a client today, and we had a very interesting conversation. So posing the question to the audience, what if you woke up and realized and recognized that most of everything that you think is not absolutely true? Like, most of everything that you think from moment to moment, the thoughts that come up in your mind are not absolutely true. And most of the time, what happens is our brain's producing thoughts a mile a minute. We know about that. Our brains are machines and they're producing these thoughts. And for most people, they just take the thought as true. And thoughts about themselves, thoughts about other people, thoughts about circumstances, we just take those thoughts to be true. So I was having a conversation today, and what brought this on is this conversation that I was having with a client that I'm coaching today, and they made a statement that the thoughts keep coming up that they are a failure. The thoughts keep coming up that they are not worthy. The thoughts keep coming up that, right, ... fill in the blank. And when these thoughts, and in the conversation I shared with them, the thoughts come up, but who decides if that thought is true? Because what had happened is the person had decided that the thought was true, had already decided and had gone down the rabbit hole, the swirl of emotions that is connected to the thought of I'm an imposter, or the thought of I'm a failure, or the thought of whatever. And so I, brought a little rigor to the conversation, as I tend to do as a coach. And I asked them, who decided that thought was true? And at the end of the day, they said that they were the ones that decided that thought was true. And so it made me think about that, this thing that we do with our thoughts, believing that everything that we think is the absolute truth, believing everything that we think, period. And the harm that can do, not only to ourselves and for ourselves, but to others. And if we pan this out and we look at where we are, especially if you look at the streaming or the feeds on social media, you can see a plethora of these thoughts that are decided to be true. You can see where people are deciding things about who other people are. I mean, we see this in our whole culture, this culture of racism and misogyny, men deciding who they think women are. And, there's just this swirl of believing the thoughts that are not true. This is what I like to call lazy thinking, because when you don't examine your thoughts, and I'm not speaking about, when I talk about examining the thoughts, I'm not talking about doubting yourself. But what I'm talking about is really looking at and examining the thoughts that are coming to your mind, especially when those thoughts influence others. Every thought that we have typically influences behavior. So I say that the listening, it drives the thought, and the thought drives the communication or the behavior. And so when we think about that, our thoughts are always influencing others. And so we need to start to look at, well, every thought that comes into our mind, is that really true? Is that really true? So this is an exercise that I gave to my client that I thought I would share here. So you have a thought that comes in, and here's the thing: some thoughts are fleeting, some thoughts are insignificant. Those are the thoughts that we don't worry about. But when we start to get those thoughts that are really strong, and how do we know that the thought is strong? Because it lands in our body in a particular way. Now, I think over the last few weeks, over the last few episodes, I've been talking about connecting with our body a bit more. And so when the thought begins to land in our body, and it creates a strong emotion, which pushes us to a behavior, when the thought comes, before we are pulled to that behavior, there's an opportunity to interrupt. We call it pattern interrupting. There's an opportunity to interrupt oneself and to ask oneself, is that thought really true? So as an example, I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were speaking about a conversation that she was to have with her mother about a particular business decision. And in the conversation, there was an active resistance to wanting to have that conversation, because what was present for her was this physiological reaction that was connected to the thought of how her mother was going to respond or react. So she had already in her mind a picture and a thought and a picture, I should say, of how her mother was going to react or respond. And there was a discomfort there. And the question is, how do you know that that is true? How do you know that's actually going to happen? Now, she could have based that thought or that decision that she made about what was going to happen in the future on the past. And that's gathering information. But when we pigeonhole someone by their behavior in the past, sometimes it prevents us from being able to have necessary conversations in the future. That said, there is a predictability with people. And then so that gives us the opportunity to build resilience around having these uncomfortable conversations. However, back to this thought. So perhaps the interaction with her mom in the past was giving her response and her resistance to want to have this conversation for fear of the thought of what this response could be in the future. So we had this conversation. I invited her to push through the discomfort to go ahead and have this conversation. The next day, she called me up, and she had this conversation, which she thought was going to create resistance and tension. She said what she needed to say to her mom, and her mom just said, okay. I was actually thinking about that myself. And it launched into this opportunity for her to be in her business in a more fulfilling way, in a more passionate way with her mother. So in essence, the decision that she had made could have caused her further harm, because there was a place where she was where she was tolerating suffering when she didn't have to. She was tolerating a suffering between her and her mom that she didn't have to. And so this is an example, and I wonder if you can think of personal examples in your life where you have made a decision to do something or to avoid something based on a thought that triggered an emotion, and where is that holding you back? Have you held back on interacting with people, on befriending people, on having conversations with people and getting to know them because you've already made a decision based on some thoughts in your mind, some beliefs that you have? And where is that holding you back from connecting with others? Are you giving feedback to a person, biased feedback based on not just your thought, your past thoughts, but someone else's thoughts? So when we talk about believing everything that we think, sometimes it's a collective thinking. We think about it in terms of organizations. I had the experience of being amongst people where I was to interact with a certain person in a coaching capacity, and everyone already had an opinion about how this person was going to respond, or how this person was going to do, or how this person, whether this person would or would not be effective in the coaching process. And for me, what the exercise was to hear what they were saying and not make a decision about the other person's thought and allow that to impact my behavior with my client. And so these are the things that we need to be thinking about on a day to day, in every thought, with every thought, with every belief. How did you even come to believe what you believe about yourself? Now, sometimes it's other people's voice, but we have the choice when someone imparts their opinion about what we're doing, who we're being, what we're thinking. We have the choice to accept or reject that belief or that thought expressed, right? Because basically when people are communicating, that's their thoughts or their belief expressed. And so we get to ask, is that really true, what they said about us, or what they said about that other person, or what they said about those people, or what they said about that situation? Is it really true? We have to examine that with every thought. We need to examine that with every belief. And we can even challenge those in our social circles, in our professional circles, and ask them, well, how do you know that to be true? Who said that? Because at the end of the day, most of our beliefs are made up. They're made up. And then societies hold these collective beliefs. They make up these beliefs. They hold these collective beliefs that then often perpetuate oppressive systems that harm others. So then we need to begin to look at, how do we dismantle those? But it's really one by one. I'm guilty of this as well. Oftentimes, especially for people who are conflict averse, oftentimes we will make up a worse belief or a worse outcome than what is actually in the space. We will create, and sometimes we will create the outcome that we fear, because if our beliefs drive our reactions and drive our behaviors, then we interact and we communicate in ways that could perpetuate that very thing to happen. And we don't often think about that. My question to you today is, what are you believing about yourself? Let's start with self first. What are you believing about yourself that you have made up? What are you believing about yourself that you could question? What are you believing about others, about another, whether it's your partner, whether it's your child, I have often have parents that will, come to me and they will say, "Can you work with my child? There's something wrong with my child." And the first thing I do is I look at them and say, "Well, who said that there's something wrong with your child? Who said that?" Right? So we have to like really look at the source of these thoughts and beliefs. The question is, what is it that you are making up about others that could not be true? And the only way to determine if you're making up something about others that's holding you back from communicating them in a particular way is to go and relate to them, talk to them, ask them questions, connect with them, because that will dispel any erroneous beliefs that may be coming up. This is the exercise that I invite you to do. Question your beliefs, question your thoughts by asking yourself, is this really true? How do I know it's true? Who told me it was true? How reliable is the source really? How reliable is the source that has told me that it's true? And if you are the answer to all of those questions, you really should question the source. I was sharing earlier with this client that there was a time where there was a gap between what I thought about myself and what other people thought about me. In my early years, I never really used to care about what people thought about me. I only cared about what I thought about myself, which I think was useful in growing up, because growing up in a part of the country and in a system where people are constantly telling you what you cannot do when you believe only what you think you can do, and you think you could do more than what everybody else is saying you could do, it makes you successful. And so it was beneficial. But I got to a point in my life where what I thought about myself and what other people thought about me shifted in the opposite direction. So I came to a point in my life where people looked at me as a mentor. People looked to me and looked at me as this light, this, mentor, this person of empowerment. And I hadn't quite matched that in my own thought of myself. And so I had to begin to practice listening to what the community was saying, such that, because what it was holding me back in a lot of my actions, a lot of my capacity to teach at a higher level, to advise at a higher level, to consult at a higher level, and to step into my own areas of expertise and impact more people. And so in discerning, and this is part of the exercise as well, when we're examining our thoughts about ourselves and we're examining our thoughts about others, particularly when we're examining our thoughts about ourselves, one of the things to be able to close that gap is to really, again, get with someone else and ask for a different point of view. And then think about that. Well, could that be true? Could it be true that, you're a mentor to others in a way that you didn't realize that you were? Could it be true that no one else has seen you as a failure except for you? Could it be true that you are an inspiration to others? So examine it both ways, both by questioning whether your thoughts are true and by examining whether other people's thoughts are true about yourself and about others. And just play with that. Because at the end of the day, all of this is an experiment. It's a game. It's an experiment that if we play with, really questioning and examining, and we play with it with curiosity, we might discover collectively a new way to be with each other. And one of the things I think that is harming our society gravely is that this lack of empathy that's happening, this propensity to harm each other without hesitation, it comes from disconnectedness from our own humanity and from the humanity between people with each other. All it is believing things that are not true, believing things that are not true, and not questioning our thoughts. It's lazy thinking. It's lazy thinking, which drives ineffective and harmful communication. So with that, I'll leave you with your exercises. These are the types of nuanced conversations that I have in organizations. These are the type of deeper inquiries, and this is a simple one, but these are the types of deeper inquiries that I create that help to dismantle faulty thinking. And this is also like really diving into the nuances of listening and communication. This is just one little snippet of how we begin to expand our listening, expand our thinking, and shift our outcomes just in that way. Because at the end of the day, these systems are made up of people, of lots of people creating these collective thoughts and beliefs. If we want to make bigger change, we have to start with ourselves. We have to start with the individual inside of organizations, inside of faith-based communities, inside of families. We have to start by questioning ourselves and then teaching this to others and expanding these teachings to others. So go do your exercises. Let me know how it goes. But if you are curious and interested about the nuances of communication, the nuances of thought, shifting thought, the nuances of shifting belief, transforming belief, retraining your brain, because this is all brain retraining, then you can go to the website there, mindremappingacademy.com. It'll be in the show notes if you're listening on replay. And you can book an appointment with me if you want to know a little bit more about our trainings, whether organizational or whether you're interested in learning the discipline of neurolinguistic programming, which is a lot of what I talk about here. Is all of this is inside of that discipline. Then you can go to the website and see some of the details of our programs. So have a great rest of the day. Keep examining your thought. Keep examining your beliefs. Pull yourself out of the binary thinking of either or. And I'll see you on the next episode. As always, stay empowered. Thank you for listening to our podcast. We know that without the listeners, there is no podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to subscribe so you do not miss when we drop our next episode, and share this podcast with a friend, a family member, and a colleague, at least one person in your life today. This episode was brought to you by the Mind Remapping Company, helping organizations create psychologically and emotionally safe cultures that make their employees and leaders feel seen, heard, respected, welcome, and valued, all while fostering a thriving, engaged, and healthy workforce for the organization. Is your organization in need of a speaker? I speak about topics like psychological and emotional safety, trauma-informed communication, and employee well-being. If this is aligned with your organizational inclusion, belonging, or leadership goals, contact me, Dr. Maisha, by going to www.mindremappingacademy.com. That's mindremappingacademy.com. Finally, we train leaders, but we also train coaches. If you're interested in becoming a trauma-informed coach, visit our website as well and check out our NLP coach trainings and certifications. We'll see you on the next episode. Until then, stay empowered.